Okay, we'll start with this. The continued fallout of the IOC's decision to ban trans athletes from the women's category. It's basically the requirement that all competitors share the same chromosomal makeup. XX athletes will compete with other XX athletes. To that, 100 human rights and scientific organizations have condemned the IOC banning men from women's sports. The organizations have called the new rule a blunt and discriminatory response that is not supported by science and violates international human rights law. So call the cops. They're calling it discriminatory when classifications, categories, and divisions in and of themselves are deliberately discriminatory, intended to section off one thing from another, one group, one gender from another. Thus, touting these classifications as being discriminatory only means the IOC is doing their job, because that's what they're for. Or what you would like is for these categories, the women's category specifically, to be more all-inclusive. But if they were going to let people born with penises into those categories, they never would have made them in the first place, because the intention was not to have biological males competing alongside biological females, and that's what they are. And what is the effort of a substrata to redefine what makes a woman? It's not having a dick, it's not having XY chromosomes, for those calling this blunt and discriminatory, and that it's not supported by science? I didn't need a degree in biology or to be an endocrinologist myself to take one look at a main K-leaf and discern this person has XY chromosomes, which was eventually confirmed in spite of all those who tried to deny it, using semantics arguments as a defense, using the same powers of discernment that any man can use to distinguish a biological man from a biological woman. I was able to arrive at that conclusion only for the science to confirm my original assertion. This individual has XY chromosomes. That makes them a biological man. What they want to run around calling themselves is their own business. But what we're not going to do is slap lipstick on a pig and then kiss it. Fuck that. Fuck anybody trying to convince us of otherwise based on their deluded and delusional worldview. Your purview would have this monstrosity competing against women when we can all see quite clearly this is not a woman. General sense, upon their inception, women's spaces were intended to section them off from biological males due to the biological differences for their protection, which you now wish to exploit. By telling us that there are no biological differences, then how did I, not being an expert in the field, know that a main K-leaf was a man? So many other people, how did they all arrive at that same conclusion, not being experts in the field? And that's the problem with what you're trying to do. You're trying to go against nature itself, which isn't going to work. It's not going to work for us. It's not going to work for the people that normally attend and watch these events, these sports that are privately owned. These Olympic Games, like any other organized sport, are a business, and it's not good for business doing what you're doing. You saw the outrage at the last games. Go woke, go broke. People watching them all gathered here today are not here to see you act out your morbid fantasies. Fucking fantasies. Fictions, and allowing you to do so, it's bad for business. It's bad for the image of the Olympic Games. In an organized sport like boxing, where most of the consumers are men, you have a hard enough time trying to convince those men to watch women fighting other women. You think they want to see women fighting men? Get fucking real. And that's the problem with a lot of those lefty lunists that think they can redefine what it means to be a woman, which is a state of being deeply embedded into the bones and the chromosomes. It's not a costume that you can just put on. But that's what you would have us believe, based on your feelings and your affinity for cosplaying fiction. Some people cosplay video game characters, cartoon characters, comic book characters. You're cosplaying broads. And you are at liberty to do so. That's your right, but it's not your human right to force all of us to play along. No more than it's my right to play for the MLB, the NHL, the NFL, the NBA. These are organized sports and private-owned companies that profiteer from consumer patronage, and substrata that you represent does not represent large enough portion of the community at large that we need to start rewriting the rules and redefining the science. Do you think there's a big market out there to see biological men boxing biological women, competing against biological women? There isn't. There's not gonna be. What you want to do on your own time is fine, but it doesn't have to include us. That is not your right. There is no market for this, and what it always was at its base was a vain attempt to reprogram the general population into accepting trans women as being biological women by having them compete in the same categories alongside each other, but all that did was create outrage.
What did you expect? You thought that we were gonna be okay with this?
Get real. Get fucking real. Because it's reality that you're at odds with now, making you mentally ill by proxy. I myself can build a state-of-the-art Iron Man costume and go as far as fashioning my facial hair and facial features the same as his. Where it becomes a mental illness is if I actually believe that I'm Tony Stark.
Stop the madness.
Because that's what it has been. A madness, a fever, that is now breaking. Elsewhere in the world of boxing, Conor Benn on whether or not he owes anything to Matchroom and Eddie Hearn, he said, "No, I don't. I don't feel like I owe anybody anything. I used my dad's career as a benchmark. Who checks for him now? Who pays his bills? I owe my family and my son a good life."
So he doesn't owe Matchroom anything. He doesn't owe Matchroom his success. To that, Paulie Malignaggi had this to say.
If it wasn't for Eddie Hearn, yeah, he's got the Ben last name, but it was Matchroom who knew how to maneuver that last name in the right
But then
way.
also dealing with all the pet issues. That was a big one, man.
With the PED issue,
Yeah.
he's not even looked anywhere near that sensational, and then as he did in those 3 fights, when the PEDs were swirling around him. I mean, he's looked barely average. Not barely average. Let's say pretty average. Not barely. That's harsh.
Well, until the Eubank fight, he looked average in those first 2 comeback
I didn't
fights.
look that good in the Eubank fight either. Eubank
In the first one, he didn't. The second one, he did.
He didn't look that good in the second one either. It was more on Eubank than it was on Ben, but it was okay. He didn't look terrible either. But that's why I think the communication issue should be a matter of respect, because what Eddie has done for Conor is I don't have a problem with him taking the 15 million. I mean, it's very difficult because you got a small window, like he says. He said all the things he said are correct, but you got to communicate it in the right way for a person that's done right by you, and really made you reach the point that you could be offered this 15 million. Because like I said, Conor Benn will never be world champion. So he's really not a guy who should be anywhere near the level of being offered 15 million. The fact that he's being offered 15 million and the fact that he's brought his name to that point, a big reason for that is Eddie Hearn and Matchroom. It's obviously his last name, but it was you needed a capable guy to know how to maneuver that last name the right way. There was a question here about.
Everywhere that Conor Benn is today has everything to do with how Matchroom promoted him. And when he decided to go pro,
For him to now be saying that he doesn't owe them anything.
then why were you the one that went to them in the first place? Why didn't you go to Queensbury? Why didn't you go to Mick Hennessy?
Cyclone Promotions was around back then.
MTK Global was around back then, and you didn't go to any of them. You must have went to Matchroom for a reason. Is it because you felt that they could do a better job for you than the other game in town because you had options and you chose Matchroom over those other options? Why? So that when they finally get you to a point where you're earning million-dollar purses and selling out stadiums, you can turn around and tell them that you don't owe them anything. I say it all the time. It's not just the promoters and the managers that are scumbags. The fighters can be scumbags too. And that's what Conor is.
Give him the opportunity and they'll show you.
Eddie Hearn rushing to Conor Benn's defense in light of his anti-doping fiasco, whether it was as a close friend or as a professional. Conor was still the beneficiary, and that was more than a lot of other promoters would have done for their fighter in that same situation, because I didn't see Frank Warren jumping on anybody's grenades to defend Dennis McCann.
Remember him? Remember when he popped hot?
So to now pretend that where he is in the sport of boxing is all of his own doing, of his own design,
He's a scumbag.
while saying that he would still like to have Eddie Hearn in his corner. In what capacity? His defense being that he fashioned his own boxing career after his father's, which is him essentially admitting that he's a Nepo baby.
Well, that's all well and good being a Nepo baby, but sometimes that by itself ain't enough. Jackie Frazier was a Nepo baby, but she didn't have the same success as her father. She didn't have the same success as a Layla Ali.
Nico Ali Walsh didn't have the same success, anywhere near the same success as his more famous grandfather. I think you've heard of him.
What's his name?
Just being a Nepo baby isn't always enough. Dismissing the role of Matchroom in what has been his own career that vigorously promoted him, kept the Chris Eubank Jr. fight alive at a time where it was dead in the water, kept pushing, kept working, kept revisiting it.
They delivered him that fight, so he could turn around and tell them he don't owe them nothing.
Fair enough, buddy. Fair enough. But I don't see Eddie Hearn being your corner anytime in the near or distant future. I don't see it. So whatever it is you're about to do with Zuffa, it better work. Because Dana White's not Eddie Hearn.
Wally says that Conor will never be a world champion. Is there any truth to that?
There might be. The original plan was for him to fight for the WBC title, but the WBC champion, Ryan Garcia, may have other plans. He might fight Devin Haney in a rematch. I'd go as far as saying he might fight the winner of Mayweather versus Pacquiao, too. I wouldn't rule it out. Devin and Rolly, the other two champions, they're supposed to be facing each other.
Leaving only Lewis Crocker, who is not only promoted by Matchroom, but he's the IBF champion. And by now, I think we all know how the IBF feels about Zuffa, that while you're over there, I don't think you get to hold that one. I don't think you get to fight for it. Maybe he can become the Zuffa welterweight champion. They have their own welterweight division. Not recognizing the juniors and the supers, he'd either have to campaign as a welter or a full-fledged middle to fight for a Zuffa belt.
But they've got Zuffa belts to hand out. Not that anybody would recognize a Zuffa champion as a full-fledged world champion. Conor Benn least of all. Those are his options while he's over there at Zuffa that, from the very beginning I said would last more than just one fight, that it's a little bit more than just a one-off for Conor. He's not going back to Matchroom.
That option is off the table.
Over to the current belt situation. World Boxing News details from 4 to 7. Boxing's major belt system explained.
Is that a PBC belt?
For decades, professional boxing revolved around 4 recognized world championship belts, but with independent titles gaining more attention and new promotional belts entering the picture, the sport may now be moving closer to 7. The official structure has not changed. However, the amendments to the Ali Act have reopened debate over what truly counts as a world championship in modern boxing. UBOs have also been proposed as an alternative route outside of the traditional sanctioning bodies. The World Boxing Association, founded in 1921 as the National Boxing Association of the United States, the organization rebranded as the WBA in 1962 as the sport expanded internationally. The World Boxing Council, established the following year in 1963 in Mexico City, the WBC quickly became one of boxing's most influential governing bodies. The International Boxing Federation, founded in 1983, following a split from the United States Boxing Association, the IBA.
The IBF.
The IBF joined the WBA and WBC in sanctioning world championship bouts. The WBO. Founded in 1988 in San Juan, Puerto Rico, the WBO initially struggled for recognition before gradually becoming accepted as one of boxing's major sanctioning bodies. It's also important to note that the IBO was founded that same year, and to date, they are not recognized by the major 4 sanctioning bodies. Over time, the WBO gained broader acceptance alongside the WBA, WBC, and IBF, forming the modern 4-belt structure that determines undisputed champions today. The Ring Magazine Championship, outside of the sanctioning body, sits a separate title that has long carried prestige within the sport. The Ring Magazine began awarding championship belts back in 1922. Unlike the governing organizations, the Ring does not sanction fights or collect sanctioning fees. The belt is traditionally awarded when the number 1 and number 2 contenders meet, or when a vacant championship is contested between the highest-ranked available contenders in the division.
Viewed as being even more prestigious than any of the alphabet titles and less subject to manipulation, it predates the alphabet organizations and is really only worn by the very best of the best in a division, existing outside of the alphabet organizations simultaneously parallel to them.
You can spit in the wind and hit an alphabet champion, but hitting a Ring Magazine champion would be a lot harder. Though now, as a result of Ring Magazine being under new ownership, its formula has come under heavy questioning, and the Ring could find itself dropping down the pecking order, often associated with the lineal idea of the man who beat the man. The Ring title represents lineage rather than governing bodies. The belt has recently received renewed attention following the magazine's acquisition by Turki El Sheikh, who is aligned with Zuffa Boxing and could push for both titles to be fully recognized soon. Promotional belts now enter into the conversation. The 2 belts that have appeared this year are the Zuffa belt and the PBC, fueling discussion about whether or not boxing could soon see more belts competing for attention. PBC recently displayed a new championship belt during Fundora vs. Thurman during Fight Week in Vegas. While the belt currently appears ceremonial, the idea of a PBC branded championship has surfaced before, including discussions in 2019, then again in 2023. For now, the belt sits outside the sport's official sanctioning structure.
The Zuffa Boxing belt. Dana White's Zuffa Boxing venture also features its own championship belt as part of a league-style format. If proposed reforms to the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act were to pass through the United States Senate, boxing could potentially see more room for league-based competitions operating alongside the traditional sanctioning bodies.
On this predication, should we the boxing fans now be worried that more UBOs like Zuffa are set to sprout from the ground, creating even more division in an already fragmented sport? I would say no, because in order to form a UBO, a league of your own, you still need to operate within certain parameters, and the only reason that Zuffa was able to was because of how many financial backers they have, backers that the PBC don't have. For example, even if they've come up with some sort of commemorative PBC title that we've seen Keith Thurman adorn, it's little more than a trinket, a trophy, not something to determine a status within a league, because the PBC is not a league of its own. It's not a UBO.
Do we expect that the alphabet organizations will have the same reservations for a PBC belt that they have for a Zuffa belt?
No, because as stated, the PBC is not a UBO. It's not a league of their own, and they don't view that belt as being a threat to their existing racket.
So are we now leaving the 4-belt era and entering the 7-belt era?
Calling it the 4-belt era is rich, when in all actuality, via 2 separate sanctioning bodies, there are 8 belts in circulation via 2 alone, not counting the IBF and not counting the WBO, via the WBC and the WBA.
They can have upwards of 4 belts in circulation apiece, totaling 8, just with them at one weight. The super, the regular, the interim, the gold, the franchise, the diamond, the interim, the world.
This is a big part of the reason I'm not against the Revival Act, because the Revival Act would limit their ability to mass produce trinket titles, cutting it down to just 1 apiece, 1 each, per division.
And I've yet to see anybody explain why that's supposed to be a bad thing. Oh, maybe it's a bad thing for their racket, for their monopoly, but it's not bad for the sport, and it's not bad for us, the fans.
It's what a lot of us have been asking for. Stop watering down the sport by handing out belts like Halloween candy.
And the Zuffa belt?
Listen, the IBO title has been around since 1988, and it's yet to be recognized as a legitimate world title by the people on both sides of the industry, so I don't think the Zuffa belt is going to have much more luck than they have.
It would take a lot of time and a lot of fights and a lot of open minds before the Zuffa belt is accepted.
The headline for the article is sensationalism, to say the least, because it implies that the Zuffa belt has been accepted and that the PBC title is an actual world title, none of which is true.